Welcome, Marin. I'm so excited to have you on my podcast. How are you today?
I'm doing wonderfully. How are you doing today?
Oh, thank you. I'm doing good too. I'm so excited to talk with you. And but first, I'm excited about the topic too. But I have an international audience, so I always ask first, where in the world are you located? And then also share with my audience one thing that has nothing to do with your business or what you do for work.
Oh, love it. I am located currently in Minnesota in the United States. It's nice and snowy outside, though spring seems to be making an early appearance, which I'm a winter girl, so I'm not ecstatic about that. Um, and something totally besides business, I've been playing guitar very recreationally for a few years. It's really what got me through grad school, I feel like, because it was my creative outlet.
Mhm.
And recently, I have hired an instructor to take real lessons. I've been
Oh,
self-taught. So that's something, it's coming back into my life, and I'm really excited to grow that skill set.
yeah, I can imagine. I saw a guitar in the background of your videos when I watched some of your videos.
Yes.
It's
Yeah, it's
really,
not just there for show, though I know sometimes people do just put it
yeah,
there
it
as
looks
for
nice.
aesthetics. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. But now let's dive in what you do for work. And maybe it even has something to do with the guitar. Who knows? But we want to talk about values and self-worth and self-trust and all that juicy stuff, let's say like that. But so your business is called Yes and I would like to know, what does it mean? Is there a story? Because yes, and we want to have values. Yes, and we want to have self-worth. Or how does it go?
Absolutely. Yes, you've already hit the nail on the head in terms of what it means, in terms of where it came from. I originally kind of a circular story because originally I was introduced to the term and the practice yes and through my life coach training in 2015,
Mhm.
and it was a way to introduce the concept of coaching, that as we're working with clients, it's accepting what is coming from the clients, which also helps the client to accept whatever they're sharing and wherever they're at
Mhm.
and move with it, which
Mhm.
fosters momentum, and it also fosters deeper understandings and bigger aha moments because we're not immediately incorporating friction into the conversation.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
then, however, and where that was inspired was from improv, but at the time I hadn't taken improv before. Then I later experienced actual improv, playing with my friends in grad school, another creative outlet during those years. And so I
Mhm.
got to experience what it's like to actually have the improv practice of yes and, which is just a way to facilitate this improvisation. And
Mhm.
so now I get to see it in both parts, and it's often one of the first questions I'm asked on interviews, which is
Mhm.
wonderful because it's a really fun story to tell. And
Yeah.
it's a really fun practice, both business life, personally, and coaching, to just try on. I also like to, as much as possible, switch but to and,
Yeah.
where it makes sense to do so, because
Yeah.
it changes everything. It transforms perspective and what's possible in ways that feels silly for just one word switch.
Yeah, yeah, no, no, but I just wanted to say that came to my mind as well because I do that too, and I don't even remember when I started that. But I feel often also for us, especially also when something maybe is a little bit bothersome, if we say da 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 da, but it's a lot of resistance, and when we say blah 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 blah, and it's more kind of it's softer and it's more accepting, no? And so I often, when I write my newsletter or so, I often change it for and I think when I'm talking, I'm not so conscious of it yet, so that might be a good reminder to make sure I say less but.
Yeah, and sometimes but makes sense. Sometimes that is the correct word to use. But
Yes.
yeah, it is fun to start playing with it and to notice how it shifts things, both in text and in how we speak.
Yeah, yeah. So you mentioned it already. So you're a life coach, and but you say you're a life coach for authentic decision making. So I want to unpack authentic first. What
Mm.
is your definition of authentic? Um, because maybe there is several definitions, not decisions, definitions. So what is yours?
Yeah, I think there really are kind of infinite, especially right now. And maybe it's becoming a little less of a buzzword, but for a while it was a really, really
Yeah.
hot topic. And so, how I see authenticity, I look to the positive psychology research a bit, but also in my practice and in when we really apply this concept to our life, what does it look like, and how do we use it to fulfill that purpose and that direction for ourselves and making decisions. So authenticity, how I see it, is this continual check-in with what feels most true for you, both in your values, your interests, your desires, and also your fears and circumstances and experiences, and then creating a life and acting in alignment with that. That action piece is a
Mm-hmm.
really important part for me and my coaching style and my clients. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not just about self-awareness. It's about
Mm-hmm.
applying that self-awareness to your life.
Mm-hmm.
And again, to highlight a word that I use, this continuous circling through. And
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't mean we always have to be scrutinizing ourselves in our lives, but it's an understanding that it isn't one end goal. We don't find our authentic self and then it's done and that's the rest of
Yeah,
our
yeah.
60 years. It's
Mm-hmm.
we're continually discovering and changing and implementing those changes in our life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. While you were talking, I just remembered I read a blog post once where about the buzzword authentic, and I don't remember who wrote it, really not, but he said, I remember it was a he, and he said, "You don't want me to act authentic because that would not be very kind in the for others, because like if I would." Because he kind of defined authentic that he would just be raw and share whatever comes to him and blurb that out. And I just like we just heard that's not what you mean with authentic.
Well, what's interesting about that, I actually now my wheels are spinning because from what I'm, and I don't know who this person is and I haven't read the blog post, but from what I'm taking, there's a good insert of but from, from what I'm taking from what you just shared, either his authentic self really is that blunt nature, in which case I would then apply the coaching tool to take responsibility for our actions. So to
Mm-hmm.
realize, my authentic persona is quite blunt. And so either to be aware of that or to let others know that or to realize that others may be
Mm-hmm.
turned off by that. And I may still choose to act in that way, maybe not all the time, but oftentimes, and just
Mm-hmm.
know and take responsibility for the consequences of
Mm-hmm.
me being authentic. Or what I could also read through your description of him is that potentially he holds a value of caring for others and being kind to others. And so, although one aspect of his authenticity is bluntness or whatever he's describing, there may also be this other component of his authentic self that is caring for others. And so the merge of those two things is the true authenticity. And that's what I work with clients oftentimes is when
Mm-hmm.
we feel like there are these two conflicting motives or
Mm-hmm.
experiences or personality traits in us. It's finding the blend of that, which also changes circumstance to circumstance. But I think sometimes we can try to, and this is natural just because our brains work this way, we can try to find the black and white answer. Either I'm blunt or I'm kind, when in
Yeah.
actuality, authenticity is finding that balance that feels best for you in the circumstance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So like with kindness, we don't necessarily mean people pleasing, but my brain kind of went there. So
Yeah.
I want to go with it. And I just want to ask you, so how do we distinguish then or separate then the being authentic and being kind from people pleasing? Because I could see that some people think they can't be authentic because that would hurt in brackets, of course, uh, their environment, and they don't want to do that, but they do that from a place of people pleasing rather than kindness. So where could we, from your perspective, make the difference there?
Such a great question. And actually, you've watched some of my videos. This is a video coming out next week for us. So it'll already be on my YouTube channel of people pleasing and being authentic. So great question. It was on my mind recently
I
as well.
haven't watched that video, but yes, I watched
Yes.
yours from yesterday. I think it's at March 1st on it, the one I watched.
Yes. Yeah. So great differentiator. People pleasing I experience oftentimes with my clients because a lot of my clients are women, and around the world, fortunately and unfortunately, women are really trained to care about what others
Yes.
think.
Mm-hmm.
And this isn't something to label as bad. Obviously, that's a wonderful trait. And where we can get in trouble with the trait is never also including our voice and our desires in it.
Mm-hmm.
So to find how can we feel best in a circumstance, which may be, for instance, not being blunt or not being as outspoken as in our internal dialogue is, and saving that for our journals or our people at home in a certain circumstance, while also owning our truth in this situation. So what's coming to mind right now is a client I worked with for years, actually, one-on-one. And she really worked, people pleasing was a big thing that she was trying to work through, and how to own her worth. And that's often came up in the work environment, but also it came up in her dating life as well, of how do
Mm-hmm.
I have standards and expectations just as much as anyone else would, while also being kind and courteous and considering others. And she found ways, and we worked together to even practice this during coaching sessions, of honoring her truth in situations that felt good for her, got the message across without that harmful or that like feeling that doesn't make us feel good if we're like
Mm-hmm.
so blunt. I keep using the word blunt, but
Yeah.
harsh
Yeah.
with someone else.
Yeah.
So it's honoring the tendency that we have of
Mm-hmm.
being people pleasing, and how can we take that down a notch or five, depending
Mm-hmm.
on where we're at, to still honor that we care for others and we've been brought up to care for others, and there's
Yeah.
good aspects of that, while also inserting our own. So I feel like my answer was pretty broad there.
Well,
But
I could give you an example if you
yeah,
wanted to,
that'd be
because
great.
my clients who struggle with often physical clutter, but I always say everything starts in the brain, so of
Hmm.
course mental clutter, and so often they either have items in their life that they have because they don't want to disappoint somebody, maybe because they got it was given to them. One client comes to mind that got some stuff from her mother, which she really doesn't care for, but she is so scared to give it away because it was her mother would be upset, or give it back to her mother. I said, you can even give it back. If you're worried that your mother gets upset, you just give it back. She can't do that either. And so this is a lot of mental clutter that creates, for example, physical clutter in her home, actually. And so she said that would be very unkind to give that back to her mother or to give it away. And to me, but she really doesn't care for it, and it's literally in her way. So to
Hmm.
me, this is very people pleasing, or tendency of people pleasing. So maybe you
Yes.
had a better approach than me to
Yeah,
help her.
what's coming to mind, it's taking an approach that was introduced in the book Crucial Conversations, which is, of course, about conversations that we have with other
Mhm.
people, and oftentimes those tense conversations where maybe we're on totally different ends of the spectrum, or we want seemingly two different things. And something talked about in that book that we can apply to this in a different way is a shared pool of meaning. So for this example, you have the daughter and the mom. The mom gave a gift to the daughter, and the daughter no longer wants it. It's adding clutter to their life and feels like we can't. And again, so normal to feel like we
Yeah,
can't give this up, or it would be disrespectful, or
yeah.
like I don't want to hurt their feelings. And so let's use this approach of what is the shared pool of meaning? What are both of us trying to do here? So the mom likely is trying to share her love, or maybe thought of her, and so gave this thing that she thought would make her happy, and maybe that's the underpinning. I just want my daughter to be happy. The
Mm-hmm.
daughter is feeling like her life is cluttered and wants to be happy or wants to feel more at ease. And
Mm-hmm.
so finding through, and maybe it doesn't land in that way, but that as being one example, they both want their daughter's happiness in this certain circumstance. So to
Mm-hmm.
start there, to have that as the basis, whether you have a conversation with your mom about this or just with yourself of, I so appreciate this gift. It made me really happy in that moment. I know you were trying to, make me feel
Yeah.
happy. And now what would make me feel happy is if we share this elsewhere, or this, create this pathway again, whether you're having this conversation personally or with that other person of this happiness is what we're wanting, and this action that at one time did help, maybe or maybe not, the
Yeah.
happiness is no longer. And so
Yeah.
let's find a different solution, because this solution actually isn't a solution at all anymore, to the
Yeah.
same meaning, the
Yeah.
same shared meaning. So there's one
Yeah.
pathway through.
I love that approach very much. What I often notice is people don't even know like whether the other person would be really upset or no or not, because they don't even go to any kind of conversation. They're just assuming that this is a no-go, and they rather people please than even going to find out whether it would be a problem. But yeah, and that leads me actually to something else that you're talking about a lot is self-worth and self-trust. And I feel sometimes there is self-worth creeping in, and I'm someone who also struggled a lot with self-worth in the past, and I'm getting better and better. But I feel like when we're just right away move to people pleasing or thinking we can't, it has to do with self-worth, because we think that our opinion or our feelings are not on an equal plane. No, the other person is more important, and we don't have that. Or do I see this wrong? You're the expert. I'm just the one who suffers from it sometimes.
Yeah. Self-worth is, I don't want to say that it's tricky, because it doesn't need to be tricky, but it's
Mhm.
it's a interesting feeling to grapple with and experience to have. And we can go about it in a million different ways. So based on where the conversation has taken us today, self-worth in comparison to others and our interactions and behaviors then with others oftentimes boils down to what's coming to mind for me most today, again, just based on this conversation, is what you pointed out of assumption, our assumption about others. And so it almost feels like it's not even to the level of comparison, because
Mhm.
we're not asking the person if they would be happy or not if we got rid of this item, for
Yeah.
instance.
Yeah.
We're just assuming that
Mhm.
they do care, and therefore we must follow what they want. And something else I think that's filtering into this, and along the conversation of self-worth, is just how many of us have been brought up to think, the perspectives and the habits that we have formed over many years, that I relate it to, with my psychology background and my developmental psychology background, specifically to our developmental stage, that we're brought up to constantly look at others for
Mhm.
advice and perspective and opinion. And we aren't really trained to look at ourselves. And so that gets blended together with self-worth, but
Mhm.
potentially it's really just a habit more than anything. And once we change the
Mhm.
habit, almost
Yeah.
like the action in front of the mindset, and sometimes that can flip-flop.
Mhm.
But with this instance, to say, am I just looking to someone else, or just falling to the opinion, and it's not even a real opinion, just the
Yeah.
make believe opinion of someone else,
Exactly.
instead of looking to myself? And again, let's start with the smallest shift that we can make. That's what I
Mhm.
do with clients, and that's really the
Mhm.
approach I see to be most effective. I'm sure you do that as well,
Exactly. Yeah.
because we can't take on the whole house all at once. It's really just starting with the thing we can start with. So noticing, are we looking to someone else for guidance? Like, at that bare minimum starting
Mm-hmm.
point. And if that's true, do we need to be looking to someone else for guidance or want to be looking to someone else for guidance in this certain circumstance? Maybe the answer is yes. I think of like just before this morning, I was looking at financial advisors, and this is an area I'm not trained in, and I might want that advice in that
Mm-hmm.
situation.
Mm-hmm.
But there are other situations where the decision really only impacts me, or at the end of the day, it is my choice what my career is,
Yeah.
or
Mm-hmm.
what life partner I choose. And am I looking to, or are you looking to someone else's opinion just because we've been trained to do that? And having a
Mm-hmm.
little pause, a little breath to say, do I need to or want to do that? And what would it
Mm-hmm.
look like to actually ask myself? And
Mm-hmm.
in taking those actions and having that, it's kind of action and mindset reframe happening at the same time, then our self worth naturally starts to hold a little bit more weight because we're
Mm-hmm.
asking ourselves. And that may not have even been happening before. Again,
Yeah.
not to anyone's fault themselves, but because
Yeah.
it's what we're told for many years.
Yeah, I do feel, especially as women, we are socialized to please or to check in. Like oftentimes, um, it is very generalized, but I come across a lot of women who do struggle with really listening to themselves because they have not been taught or brought up that way. And I do feel sometimes that boys, we want to talk about boys and girls, but boys are more encouraged to do what they want, and it's also more accepted by society if they just boldly do whatever they want, rather or compare in comparison to women. When as a woman you do what you want, you may end up quickly be called uncaring and well, all kinds of not so kind words that I don't want to say now. And so, yeah, it's definitely, I would think it's from society, which is always changing too. So, like, I also always want to say we don't want to put our parents under the bus because they only did whatever they knew to do and could do, and we are in different times now. So I think it's also more in the foreground.
Yeah, yeah, it's starting to shift, and to remind ourselves of that and that we do have control over that to a certain degree. And also to your point, and this isn't just opinion or observation, this is backed by the research as well, that
Yeah.
when women take a powerful leadership role, the word contempt is what both men and women tend to feel when we see a woman in power, just because of the socialized
Yeah.
nature that
Yeah.
we've all been brought up in.
Yeah.
And to recognize there's the whole societal and the systematic thing that we can go into, and
Mm-hmm.
that is not my area of
Don't have
expertise,
to.
though
No,
I
no,
am
no,
passionate
no,
to
no.
support others who is that area of
Yes.
expertise. But what we're talking about today is recognizing how that impacts us personally, and are we looking at ourselves with contempt because
Mm-hmm.
we are trying to own our power, if only in a small conversation, or in only if making one decision just for ourselves. And rather than beat ourselves up about that, just see that and say,
Yeah.
yeah, that would be expected, how I've been raised and how society is right now,
Yeah.
although it's changing.
Mm-hmm.
And do I then want to oblige by that standard,
Mm-hmm.
or start to shift it? And then
Yeah.
you have the power, it takes the power back into your hands.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And I think so too. It's like, especially if you're an adult by any standard, then we have the power to change it. And it may not be overnight, like and I always say when my clients always want to have a change overnight, I always say, like, you don't want that because you're not ready for this overnight change, which
Mm-hmm.
brings a lot of challenges with you. But so now, talking about all this, how does decision making come in? Because you're also helping your clients making authentic decisions. So how is your approach then for helping clients making decisions different than other approaches?
Yes. Yes. So I've played around with even using the title decision coach, and
Mhm.
really just to specify when I reflect on, and this also ties back to the book I released last year, which is a 7-step process for making decisions. And ultimately what I see happening in all of my coaching sessions is that it's just about making decisions and simplifying what's happening. I think sometimes, especially in the field of life coaching, it can feel so broad of like, I'm gonna coach about my entire life. It can just feel
Mm-hmm.
very overwhelming. And to say all we're doing is we're making one decision at a time. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes this is big. Sometimes clients come to me wanting to change their career or enter or exit a relationship, or they're just struggling with their identity and who are they as people. And sometimes this is small of just and not small in the significance of it, but just a question of, I don't, something feels off and I don't think I want to totally disrupt my entire life, but make a small change. In all of those scenarios, where authentic decision making comes in the framework that I've developed and work with my clients, is what we've been talking about already today, filtering all of these decisions through our authentic lens, through our own desires, passions, interests, fears, all of the above, and letting that
Mm-hmm.
hold weight in the decision making process. So,
Mm-hmm.
what differentiates my process and what I then help my clients to start flexing this muscle from other forms of decision making is that it's genuinely coming from each individual. So,
Mm-hmm.
I call myself, and the subtitle of my book also declares, this is a guide. This isn't advice.
Yes.
This isn't a mentorship. And that's what differentiates coaching, at least my style of coaching, from
Yeah.
other fields. This is me helping you to bring out your own wisdom and definitely showcase blind spots and ask different questions that will help you in the perspective shift and the practice of this, because it's a new skill that you're developing. And ultimately, I will never ever make a decision for a client or give advice,
Mm-hmm.
even. It's
Yeah.
about offering these different perspectives and questions so that the client, and then the beauty of this happening in all of the sessions of them having the realization or admitting what they're actually wanting or letting their opinion or desire or fear have a space in the room and in the conversation,
Mm-hmm.
and then making decisions based off of that information, which can only come from them. It can't come
Yeah.
from anyone else.
Yeah, I really love that, because that's also how I'm trained around helping people with clutter. And two things I often say: clutter is unmade decisions, so decisions you haven't made yet. And that's why you have clutter, no matter whether it's physical, mental, emotional, whatever, you just haven't made the decision yet to deal with
Mm-hmm.
it. And the other thing I also say, always, because a lot of people are scared when they come to somebody that helps with clutter, that they're being told things. And I always say, like, I will never tell you to get rid of anything. Never. It's not my place. This is not what I do. And I call myself also kind of like a guide and a coach. I'm not giving advice. I'm not telling what you need to do. I'm helping you uncover what you need to do for you. And so that's why I love your answer so much. And you talked already about your book. I love the title, Ready Enough. It's like,
Yes.
and you say there that it's a guide to free ourselves from doubt and fear, trust our gut feelings, and lead our life with confidence. Um, can you quickly share a little bit what got you to write this book, and maybe a small insight from it that my audience is inspired to go buy it? I mean, I'm
Yes.
sure they're inspired already by what they heard from you, but maybe you can give them a little, little
Yes,
extra.
yes. So what inspired me to write this, I always knew I wanted to write a book, and in fact, this book I continuously call it my first book because I know there will be more books to come.
Mm-hmm.
I just
Awesome.
I make sense of the world through writing. So
Mm-hmm.
I've kept a journal since forever. In fact, it's very entertaining to go back to like my sixth grade journal and read what I was thinking at the time. And also, I was told by many professors and teachers along the way, "You're going to write a book someday," and I said, "Yes, I will." And when 2020 occurred, we all went into lockdown. I
Mm-hmm.
thought, now's the time. Now's the time to write that book that I've been wanting to write.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a lot of ideas and a lot of directions. Again, there will be more books to come because I have more ideas. But I hired an author coach and I really helped to hone in, where do I want to start? And what I wanted to do, of course, embed it with my client work. And I was specifically thinking of so many clients who come to me and they aren't quite ready for the intensity of coaching, of really ready to dive into whatever question is on their heart, or even the group coaching program I have. If they're just not at that stage yet for any reason, what's a resource I can provide them that still creates real change and invites this perspective shift and these life-changing practices of coaching. And as I started to parse that out, I am very much an analytical thinker as well. So I wanted to organize it in a way that made sense and simplified things. And that's where the 7-step decision-making process came in. So
Mm-hmm.
essentially it's a framework of how I coach my clients and how we work through
Mm-hmm.
any life transition or decision or question that they
Mm-hmm.
have, but it's through the lens of decision making, which you can apply to anything really. And in terms of a good indicator of what would make this book enticing to read instead of any other self-help book or coaching book
Yeah.
that's out there, because I know there are so many. I had my best friend, and she was reading it once it was published, really just to support me because she's amazing. And she sent me the most gorgeous, heartwarming text after and as she was reading it. She said, you know, I've never liked self-help books. I felt like they were preachy and made me feel bad about how I was living my life. And your book just makes me feel empowered and more confident to continue
Mm-hmm.
living a life that I choose, that I want to live. And that's the point anyway. And
Yeah.
so it very much takes this perspective of holding your hand and encouraging you. And this definitely is my positive psychology and just my positive personality coming through the book. It isn't about looking at your life and pointing out all the things that you're doing wrong, because you're doing the best that you can. Everyone is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Rather, it's about how can you make this even better? How can you answer your own questions? And having like a lot of real talk in the book as well. So one of the 7 steps is called the oh shit moment. It's called the moment where you're like, oh shit, this is the direction I want to take, or this is the decision I'm about to make,
Yeah.
or this is what I
Mm-hmm.
want. And so that type of dialogue and that type of conversation is interwoven throughout, which also makes it very refreshing to read
Yes.
instead of like work. It's very fun.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was already very intrigued and thought I needed to read the book. And after you talked with me, you definitely have one more reader, because I'm gonna, although I'm an avid reader, so I have to put it on a list, but I will
Yes, me
definitely
too.
read it. Well, I'm always reading about 3 books at the same time, so it will not be too long that I get to it. But
I look forward to hearing your takeaways. That's very fun.
yeah, I can for sure share them with you, because the more I'm listening to what you're saying, like I knew before already, we kind of are aligned, but this is what you just said too, is like we don't want to be preachy, and I sometimes feel too is like, especially with um, clearing clutter, which was very very buzzy for a while too, because of certain books that came out, and
Yeah.
I or when you look on Instagram, I often feel too is like I feel like, oh, I don't want to feel that way, and I'm not somebody that has a lot of physical clutter, for example, but all these kind of preachy how you should do it or how you should label all this. I have nothing labeled and all that. And I always say, like, to me, decluttering is self-love. What does feel better? Does your environment, whether it's your physical, your mental, your emotional, does it feel good to you? If not, let's change something. And it often has to do with clutter, and oftentimes the mental and emotional clutter manifests in the
Mm-hmm.
outside as physical clutter. And so that's where we want to go and help. And that's why, for example, on my Instagram, you don't find any before after, you don't find any shaming, you don't find any, oh, let's label all these spices in the kitchen or something, because I
Yeah.
think this is beside the point.
Yeah, you're tapping into something that we've talked about, and I'm now coming up with the words for it, or you helped me get there, which is the feeling. What's the feeling
Yeah,
beside it? So
yeah,
back to the conversation on self-worth that we were touching on.
yeah.
How does it feel to be in the conversation that you're in, or to be making the decision that you're making? Does it feel good? And if it does, you're probably honoring your self-worth and yourself and what you desire
Mm-hmm.
and your authenticity. If it doesn't feel good, probably you're not honoring yourself in
Yeah,
some capacity, or you don't feel like you're able to or have the autonomy, and potentially that's from some external factor, unfortunately in
yeah,
our world that influences this. But potentially it's you, and something that you can take a little more control over, or put your foot down about something, or say things in a different way. And that really is, and that's in my book as well, of that's the data point. I think one of the most important data points that we often miss in terms of
mm-hmm.
making decisions, in terms of
Mm-hmm.
clearing our spaces or designing our spaces intentionally, is how does it feel for you?
Yeah.
And like, that's what matters. And that can be our compass. And how simple it is, and yet how uncommon it is, again,
Yeah.
because many of us are taught to look for all the external data, and not to dismiss that altogether, but to also consider our internal
Yeah.
feeling as data.
Yeah. 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 So true. So true. And it doesn't only can be our North Star or guidance. It's like for me, I feel like it almost has to, in a
Mm.
way, not by ignoring everybody else. Like we don't want to become that way, but it first has to feel good to us, I feel. And this leads me actually to almost the last question that I wanted to ask you. In one of your YouTube videos, you were also talking about evaluating, and that a lot of people never evaluate um, uh, their life, I would think, but
Yeah.
even evaluate their feelings or evaluate like, and it's an important step for decision making, I would think. So maybe you want to expand a little bit on that.
Yes, yeah. And also I love, thank you for watching my content. It makes the interviews much more engaging when, when there's actually this material to jump off of. And it's been something for anyone listening. I'm really working on growing my channel, so I would appreciate others to watch and pitch in your feedback. In terms of this evaluation and where this is coming up in the context of the video is this is one of the attributes to greater life satisfaction, is to have this component of evaluation of life as a way to find and foster the life satisfaction. What that means is to have you define what is a good life for you, which we've talked about a lot today, and just now, that feeling component. What I think is can feel tricky with this sense of evaluation, and I'm also thinking of it in my master's degree program. I'm a professionally trained evaluator as well by trade, and so data driven decisions is the field of evaluation. And even in honing in on that field and academia alone, and just us, when we think of data, what do we think of? We think of numbers oftentimes and spreadsheets and data. And when we look at evaluation, and a great evaluation project and report includes not only the quantitative data, not only the numbers, but also the qualitative data. And
Mm-hmm.
that's getting a little technical into that field, but we
I
can
love
apply
it.
it to our own lives. Of, are we just looking at the
Mm-hmm.
numbers, like how
Yes.
much we're making, how many homes we have, or whatever those numbers are that are, and again, natural to do that because it's tangible, it's something we can grab onto, it's a goal we can set. But are we also considering the qualitative side of our
Mm-hmm.
evaluation of our life? How do I
Mm-hmm.
feel? What do I desire? What is my passion? What is my purpose? What lights me up? What makes me excited? Am I having fun? Am I feeling things fully, which also includes the heartache and the challenges
Mm-hmm.
as well? Am I allowed to go there? Do I feel safe to go there? And letting that be a guidance and a check-in, almost this North Star, I guess, is
Yeah.
I like roll my eyes because it's an overused term, but that is such an important part of creating a fulfilling and meaningful life, is having the evaluation of your life, not just the goals and the milestones and the numbers, but also the whole picture of
Yeah.
the what you deem as your good life. And you can certainly look to others in the research for inspiration. There's research on what qualifies a good life. That is what positive psychology studies, but also, again, to circle it back through your authentic lens.
Yeah, no, and I love so much that you say this, also the distinction between quantitative and qualitative, because in my work, what I come often across is that people have a lot of stuff in their life because they thought they needed this stuff to either feel happy or to keep up with the neighbor, or they were told by commercials that's what they need to have a happy life. And then they notice they're not much happier because that's actually not really what they wanted. They took that outside yeah, I don't want to call it advice, outside noise, the outside noise, they took that, never really asked themselves. And yeah, and to actually really figure out, is that how I define a happy and fulfilled life, to have all this stuff? Obviously not, otherwise they wouldn't, you know. So that's why I love your answer so much. Yeah.
Yeah, Yeah. And to make that even more tangible and practical, if you find yourself setting a goal or taking inspiration or wanting a thing, wanting material or whatever it is, an achievement, to ask yourself why. And there's also a practice of the 5 whys. So
Mm-hmm.
just like a little kid who just persists and says why,
Yes, drives
why,
mom
do
nuts.
that with yourself of I really want, and I'll do this in real time. I've had my eye on this so cute Mercedes car. I've never been into cars, but this one version that they don't make anymore, I'm like, this is adorable, and I think I really want this. To
Mm-hmm.
then dig down and say, well, why do I want it? Well, because it's
Mm-hmm.
cute and it makes me feel giddy. Why is that important to me? Well, because I
Mm-hmm.
want to feel excited and happy about and confident as I drive around. Why does that feel good? Well, because then I am able to connect with people more because I'm just like in this natural,
Mm-hmm.
more fun state of flow, and to keep digging down. And oftentimes we can get to a root that doesn't necessarily mean we no longer have the physical
Mm-hmm.
manifestation of this, but it also gives us something to ground us, that we're not just constantly reaching for that
Yes.
material thing. We also have an understanding of, yeah, this is why it's so important, or maybe I can access this immediately in a different
Mm-hmm.
way,
In a different
or
way,
through another
exactly.
means that would make it
Mm-hmm.
even
Yeah.
a greater manifestation of that thing.
Yeah, and I find that very important, especially if somebody is upset that maybe it's not possible financially, maybe to get to that point, or maybe it's not even financially, but for other reasons, to do this why, to figure out what is the core feeling that we want with this item, and then maybe find that core feeling in something else that is accessible. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, oh gosh, I could talk with you forever.
I
Can't do
agree.
that, but I can have you back eventually again.
Yes.
But for now, where can people find you? I can't speak anymore. Where can people find you? What's your preferred method that they engage with you? I'm pretty sure you said already you want to grow your YouTube channel, so everybody goes over. And what's the name of your YouTube channel that you want to grow?
Yes, yeah, I'm very excited to grow this, and specifically to grow it with a community. I really see that being a place for me to connect more deeply out of all the social platforms. I feel like that's a place I can show up most authentic because I can tell the whole story instead of just, a quick blurb. So Yes and by Marin, YesandByMarin is the YouTube channel.
Mhm.
That's also my Instagram. That's also my website. So it makes it very
Mhm.
easy.
Yeah.
Yesandbymarin.com is where you can go, and you can find all the links as well. And in terms of where to start, because sometimes that's a lot of information, or like, what do I choose? I recommend all podcast listeners, we've talked about the book today, to go download the first chapter for free. So I have that
Mhm.
available at yesandbymarin.com/readyenough. And that way you get the first chapter. You also get some more bonus gifts. And you have all the links and everything you need to connect with me on all the other platforms. So that's such a great place to start, and also gives you a good taste if you do want to read the full book.
Yeah.
That would be a good.
Yeah.
Someone posted a review on Amazon. They said, read the first chapter and you'll know. You'll know if this book is for
That's
you.
awesome. And I will put all these links in the show notes for sure. So then people can just, wherever they listen, they can just click on it and they will be right there
The
at Marin.
magic of technology.
So now, because we have to be mindful, or I want to be mindful, let's say like that. Let's wrap this up, and I will have you back if you wanted to. But for now, let's wrap this up with some last words of wisdom or additional wisdom, because you gave so much wisdom already. Or maybe I didn't ask you a question that you wished I would have asked you. So you can just answer that one.
Yes, so much room for possibility in this final statement. I, with podcasts, and I put myself in the podcast listener shoes as well, because I love a good podcast. There's so much information, there's so much goodness, and next steps that you could do, and changes that you're inspired to make. And so at the end of all of it, especially a longer form podcast, just take a moment, take a pause, and practice this self-trust muscle right away, and just say, what about that whole conversation made me feel most inspired, or perked my
Mhm.
ears the
Mhm.
most? What really resonated with me and interested me? And just note that one thing down for yourself, and almost forget the rest. Trust that if you
Mhm.
need to remember it later, it'll be there, or you can re-listen. But for now, just what is the one thing that stood out for you and trust whatever that is. And then you're already practicing self-trust and self-worth and all the good things. And you're taking away your biggest insight, and you have so much more of a chance of actually remembering it because you're noting just one thing. And that's where real change happens.
I think that's my favorite answer to my last question.
Oh, I love it. Yay.
Thank you so much, Marin, for your time, for your wisdom, for being here and sharing this all with us and with me and my audience. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.